do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
I thought that it was a matter of real concern that planted stories intended to serve a national purpose abroad came home and were circulated here and believed here.
Yeah, oh God, I can't believe, see, this is why I didn't want to give this talk, because I knew that we'd have this conversation, and now it's on the record.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
All right, let me take a step back, and we have to deal with it. Let me take a step back and a deep breath, because this is a very painful thing to talk about.
Because this would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. And we're looking at that very carefully.
So, all over the world, we know, it's well established, the State Department and intelligence agencies engage in theater, and it's what they do, it's spycraft, to create spectacles and events that people may not realize are spectacles and events, but that, well, like the overthrow of Mossadegh in the 50s in Iran.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to the national news services, AP and UPI?
Well, again, I think we're getting into the kind of detail, Mr. Chairman, that I'd prefer to handle in executive session.
They'll funnel money to protesters, they'll, fly people in to infiltrate protesters, they'll create fake newspapers, and so on.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, the ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
I believe that a law has been passed in the United States. I think it's part of the Defense Authorization Act. I need to confirm this. That, now makes it legal to propagandize American citizens. Do we know about that? Yeah, it's true.
I think it was entirely in order for our correspondents at that time to make use of CIA agent chiefs of station and other members of the executive staff of CIA as sources of information which were useful in their assessments of world conditions.
What this means is, and as a journalist to say these words, I can't tell you with what a heavy heart I say them, but we've entered an era in which it is not crazy to assess news events to see if they're real or not real. And in fact, it's kind of crazy not to.
Would you say that continues today?
Well, I would think probably for a reporter it would continue today, but because of all of the revelations of the period of the 1970s, it seems to me that a reporter's got to be much more circumspect in doing it now, or he runs the risk of at least being looked at with considerable disfavor by the public. I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
I'd like to address a few brief words to the American people watching at home. If you watched the impeachment hearings last week, you may have noticed a disconnect between what you actually saw and the mainstream media accounts describing it.
There's, pardon me, this kind of reflexive vilification of anyone speculating about that because they become a conspiracy theorist, right?
When you saw 3 diplomats who dislike President Trump's Ukraine policy discussing second-hand and third-hand conversations about their objections with the Trump policy. Meanwhile, they admitted they had not talked to the president about these matters, and they were unable to identify any crime or impeachable offense the president committed. But what you read in the press were accounts of shocking, damning, and explosive testimony that fully supports the Democrats' accusations.
This is Watergate plus, right? Watergate was more of a domestic issue, rule of law at stake. The articles involved contempt of Congress, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power.
If these accounts have a familiar ring, it's because this is the same preposterous reporting the media offered for 3 years on the Russian hoax. On a nearly daily basis, the top news outlets in America reported breathlessly on the newest bombshell revelations, showing that President Trump and everyone surrounding him were Russian agents.
Judiciary, do you believe the president right now has been an agent of the Russians?
Yes, I think there's more evidence than he is. Yes, and I think all the arrows point in that direction, and I haven't seen a single piece of evidence that he's not. An agent like in the 1940s where we had people who are Reds, to use an old term, like that. In other words, working for a foreign power. He's working on behalf of the Russians, yeah.
Okay.
It really wasn't long ago that we were reading these headlines. From CNN, Congress investigating Russian investment fund with ties to Trump officials. This was false. New York Times, Trump campaign aides had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence. Also false.
To me, it's always been a question of collusion with the Russians, all kinds of weird entanglements. 101 we're counting and counting right now between the Trump people and the Russians, and obstruction of justice. I wonder if this is one of those cases where there's an overlay. Because if he was covering up his business dealings so that he could cover up the fact that he was talking nice about Mr. Putin all those times to keep a business deal warm, that is a real problem in our country, as a country.
Yes, that's evidence of collusion. That is an entanglement with the country that is not our friend. And
Slate was a Trump server communicating with Russia. This was false. New York Magazine, will Trump be meeting with his counterpart or his handler? This was false. The Guardian, Manafort held secret talks with Assange and Ecuadorian embassy. Also false. BuzzFeed, President Trump directed his attorney to lie to Congress about the Moscow Tower project. All of these were false. There was no objectivity or fairness in the media's Russia stories, just as a fevered rush to tarnish and remove a president who refuses to pretend that the media are something different from what they really are, puppets of the Democratic Party.
And that when President Trump is in front of the cameras, he goes off script. He undermines the U.S. government, and again, he helps to spread Russia's messages.
With their biased misreporting on the Russia hoax, the media lost confidence of millions of Americans, and because they refused to acknowledge how badly they botched the story, they've learned no lessons and simply expect Americans will believe them as they try to stoke yet another partisan frenzy.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake. A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
He will be forever remembered as the president who traumatized little children. That's his brand now. He's the president who purposefully traumatized babies and children. And he traumatized them for his political gain, or to look strong, or to look like Kim Jong-un.
Donald Trump talks like a racist, thinks like a racist, makes statements like a racist, conjures emotions that give succor and support to white supremacists and white nationalists. He has emboldened white supremacists to come forward.
The world witnessed a betrayal the likes of which we've never seen. America's president sided with its enemy today.
He's inciting through mass rallies and constant lying fervor in a political base. He scapegoats minority populations and affixes blame to them for every problem the country faces. He alleges conspiracies of nefarious forces, and frankly could be straight out of Munich circa 1928.
If anybody is issuing demented words of violence and death, I would say it's the President of the United States. I mean, it's quite a pass we've come to when the leadership of a country like Iran seems more stable and rational than the President of the United States.
And if you vote for Trump, then you, the voter, you, not Donald Trump, are standing at the border like Nazis, going, you here, you here. And I think we now have to flip it, and it's a given the evilness of Donald Trump. This whole administration, it's like a Liam Neeson Taken movie. Like, these guys are terrorists, right? They are constantly taking hostages, whether it's Chip, whether it's DACA, whether it's the asylum. They have no problem taking kids and putting guns to their heads and then demanding the rest of the country do what they want them to do. Until we recognize that we are operating with a white nationalist government that will take children hostage to get what they want.
I call this a concentration camp for kids because that's exactly what is turning out.
And I know children are being marched away to showers. I know they're being marched away to showers, or they're being told they are, just like the Nazis had said that they were taking people to showers and then they never came back.
Get this mendacious, relentlessly lying, bigoted, ill-informed person that we have.
Goes out there and whips up like it's a Mussolini rally. Yes, that's what I said.
This is not the party of Lincoln, the party of Nixon, or even the party of Reagan. This is the party of D.W. Griffith. This is the party of the KKK and the party of Trump.
Our responsibility to call out those times when constitutional norms are being challenged, those times when the President of the United States actually channels Joseph Stalin and calls the media the enemy of the people.
The president is a disturbed person, and he's behaving in ways that are simply inexplicable.
He's completely detached from reality, and you have somebody inside the White House that the New York Daily News says is mentally unfit, that people close to him say is mentally unfit, that people close to him during the campaign told me had early stages of dementia.
I'm glad elected leaders in the Republican Party are finally stopping looking the other way and confronting the fact that he's not only unfit to be president. In my book, his lack of empathy, his lack of leadership, his lack of courage, he's unfit to be human.
Trump is a racist. He isn't just a white supremacist. He's a flat-out, full racist.
Citizens in dictatorships recognize what's happening right here, right now. Are they looking at the first 2 days of the Trump administration and saying, huh, that's what my leader does?
Mr. Trump, your presidency, I love your presidency. I call it disgrace the nation. You're not the POTUS, you're the bloatus. You're the glutton with the button. You're a regular Gorge Washington. You're the presidents, but you're turning into a real prick-tater. Sir, you attract more skinheads than free Rogaine. You have more people marching against you than cancer. You talk like a sign language gorilla who got hit in the head. In fact, the only thing your mouth is good for is being Vladimir Putin's holster.
We had set ourselves well above and beyond the law, beyond the Congress, beyond the Constitution. We were lying to the President, lying to the Secretary of State, lying to the Congress about what we were doing.
But are such stories true? Tonight, two former CIA officers tell reporter Christopher Hurt how lies invented about Angola and Nicaragua found their way into the world's press. Two experienced journalists tell him the difficulties they've had telling fact from fiction. Some people call this process disinformation, others call it lying. The CIA just call it a standard technique.
And so any kind of story that you could write and get into the media anywhere that pushed that line, you did. 1/3 of my staff in this task force was covert action, was propagandists whose professional career jobs was making up stories and finding ways to get them into the press.
Wait. Wait.
On your marks. Get set. Go!
Because we had a fire alarm earlier that day, and that was a drill. So we thought this was a drill too, just another one. Because we have a lot of fire alarms, a lot of fire drills at the school. After we heard the first gunshot, we initially thought it was a drill. Actually, that was a bad choice. Actually, that was a bad choice because the janitor... Sorry.
It's okay. You're fine, David. You're fine.
Honestly, when I was going out, I was kind of in... I wasn't... Hold on.
It's okay.
When I was going out, I was in shock.
Just saying, I don't know how to put this in perspective.
So most of my friends that made it out, one of them went into a bathroom in the same, I believe in the same hallway as the shooter. Hold on. One of them went into the same bathroom, I believe, as the hallway shooter. He was in there at the same time, and he was in the bathroom, and he didn't know if he was going to live.
School bus driver picked them up. I think she had just let off some kids or was in the area. And they came inside the house, and they started talking about blood coming out of her mouth. And they said, "What are we going to do for a teacher? Our teacher's dead." Matt, I mean, they were so distraught. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I can't even imagine this. These children. My grandson is 8. He's 8 years old. They're just starting out. How can anyone do this? How can anyone do this? How can anyone do this? These children in my house were so frightened. Oh my God, they were so frightened. I've never seen children terrorized. They were just so frightened. Some lady came looking for her son. I hope he's not one of the children. She said, "I heard you had 6 kids here." I said, "I took him to the firehouse." Her face looked frozen in pain. I've never seen anything like that. Her face looked like it was stone. I said, "What is your child's name?" And she gave me the name. I have to find out about that kid. How could you kill children? How could you kill one child? Here's my grandson. That's how I am.
But all over the world, our intelligence services are engaged in conspiring to create outcomes. That's their job. That's how they're successful. So now that it's illegal to propagandize in the United States, it doesn't surprise me that there's more and more products coming up in popular culture, more and more events in the news stream that seem to be, to my eye, to be subsidized. We also talked earlier about infiltrators, right? And how they provoke violence. This is well established. So if we know that infiltrators by the police, NYPD, they've been documented, or other police forces, dress up like people they're not and provoke violence, why is it unthinkable that there might be spectacles that might drive an outcome in the news stream? We've entered a time in which we need to be very skeptical about the news stream and look at it critically and ask for more verification and more inquiry. And that's just being good reporters. And it makes it like this. There's spectacle fed into the news media in China. There's spectacle fed into, like Chile. How did Pinochet, engage in his coup? He created photographs of a cache of weapons that the terrorists had, hidden. Was it real? Was it not? Most historians think it wasn't. I mean, this is like not unusual, in the process of creating a closed society. So if laws have made it legal to assassinate American citizens and legal to propagandize them, why should it be crazy or weird to think that that might be for a reason, right? All right. I saw the movie Zero Dark 30, thank you very much. And I have worked on 2 presidential campaigns, so I recognize political talking points. And I wrote a piece saying, this reads like the Pentagon signed off on the script. Because there were like chunks of political talking points identifiable to anyone who's worked in Washington, right? And you don't come up with those if you're a writer writing a screenplay. And everyone was very upset. It was very controversial and scandalous. But in fact, belatedly, a news story came out saying that in fact the Pentagon had, I think, subsidized some of it, but had certainly consulted directly on the script. And I see more and more TV shows about the CIA and more TV shows about spies and gigantic blockbusters in which surveillance is normalized and gigantic blockbusters in which people are tortured to get them to talk in a way that might exonerate people who actually tortured people to get them to talk in Guantanamo. And there's all this money being pumped into these unaccountable, terrorism fighting things. And now there's no law preventing that money from going through front organizations right into popular culture. So that's of interest to me. And I'm skeptical of certain news events that seem more theatrical than the norm, or I want to ask questions about them. So ever since that experience, CNN is running with this. No one's verifying it. Journalists aren't in a position to follow up on anything anymore because budgets are slashed and there's no investigative reporting. All this nonsense can enter the media stream for purposes that have to do with advancing agendas because no one's checking. That's all I want to say about that. Can I take more questions? So Boston, I guess my feeling about any of these things is let's investigate. We need to investigate. We need to ask better questions. We need to interview the doctors at the hospital. We need to interview the victims. We need to, get all the footage ourselves. We need to train citizens to be journalists and to have websites. And I'm busy building one as a startup where citizen journalists can document events so that we're not leaving it to the gatekeepers.
But I am only against the fake news media or press. Fake. They have to leave that word. I'm against the people that make up stories and make up sources. They shouldn't be allowed to use sources unless they use somebody's name. Let their name be put out there. Let their name be put out. It says that Donald Trump is a horrible, horrible human being. Let him say it to my face.
I'm not here too. Okay, why do you have something to say? Why are you being so mean to me? Why are you being so mean to me?
She hit SWAT at his camera, and I got that on. I got that on film.
Like this.
No, you went like this, and I got it on film. You swung at it. This is fake news, guys. NBC fake news. Fake news. We know you guys get your talking points from the CIA every morning, 4 a.m. Every single network gets them. Every single network. That's why you guys, your stories are verbatim, the same thing every single day, in every single state, and every single network. Yes.
4 a.m. That's when they get.
That's why all their stories are the same in every single state and every single network.
It's the same thing.
Verbatim, the same news. They repeat.
There's nothing new. Whether it's NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, they're all telling the same story.
They're losing their grip on people trusting them.
Look at.
We don't have a narrative like you guys. Okay, bye. Bye, fake news. Bye. Bye-bye. Yeah, you guys are gonna all lose your jobs really soon. There's not gonna be any money anymore.